Commander Zekthara sat in the corner of the medical bay where the lights were dim, and the air was thick with the smell of healing gel. His blue-green carapace showed fresh scars from the last battle, and his forearms moved slowly as he cleaned his weapon for the 100th time. The young recruit named Vexini approached him with careful steps because everyone knew the commander did not like to be disturbed when he was in this mood. Vexini had heard stories about the humans and wanted to know if they were true. The other. Soldiers whispered about creatures that fought without fear and did impossible things in battle. Some said humans could not be killed, and others claimed they were demons from the dark void between stars. Vexini needed to know the truth before his first mission to the human worlds. The commander looked up with his large black eyes and studied the young soldier for a long moment. Zekthara could see the eagerness in the recruit's face, and it reminded him of himself 6 cycles ago when he first heard about the human problem. Back then, he thought it would be easy glory and quick promotion. How wrong he had been. "You want to know about the humans, youngling?" Zekthara said in his deep voice that sounded like grinding stones. "Sit down and listen well, because what I tell, you might save your life when you face them, and you will face them because they are everywhere." Now Vexini sat on the metal bench and waited as the commander put down his weapon. Zekthara's eyes became distant as he remembered things he wished he could forget. The memories were still fresh, even though the war had been going on for 6 long cycles. When the High Command first told us about humans, we laughed. Zekthara began. The intelligence reports said they were a young species that had barely left their home world. They had simple technology and their ships were slow and weak. They fought among themselves constantly and could not agree on anything. The War Council said we would conquer them in 2 rotations of their son. Vexini leaned forward because this was not what he expected to hear. If humans were so weak, why did the commander look so haunted when he spoke of them? "The first reports came from our scouts who watched their outer colonies," Zekthara continued. "Humans lived on worlds that would kill most species. They built cities in frozen wastelands and burning deserts. They mined asteroids in space without proper life support. Our scouts said humans seemed to enjoy suffering, which made no sense to us. The High Command decided humans were perfect slaves because they could work in dangerous places. The plan was simple. We would destroy their military and take the survivors for labor. It seemed logical because humans were weak and we were strong. We had conquered 47 species before them, and they all surrendered when they saw our power. But there were signs we should have noticed," Zekthara said as his voice grew quieter. "Human entertainment showed them fighting impossible odds and winning through determination. Their history was full of wars where smaller forces defeated larger ones. They had sayings about never giving up and fighting to the last breath. We thought these were just stories, but we were wrong." The commander stood up and walked to the small window that looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, human ships were hunting hegemony forces and winning battles they should have lost. The war that was supposed to last 2 rotations had now gone on for 6, and there was no end in sight. "I was a squad leader then," Zekthara said without turning around. "My unit was chosen for the honor of the first assault on their home system. We felt proud to be selected for such an easy mission. 300 of our best warships against a handful of human patrol vessels. The odds were so favorable that some officers brought their mates to watch the victory. When we dropped out of hyperspace near their sun, the human ships were waiting for us. There were only 12 of them against our 300. Our admiral sent a surrender demand expecting them to give up immediately. Instead, their leader sent back a message that still haunts my dreams. The human captain said his name was Jake Morrison, and he commanded something called the Defiance. He told our admiral that humans did not surrender and that we had made a terrible mistake coming to their system. Then he said something that made no sense. He said we would learn what human defiance really meant. Our admiral laughed at the message and ordered the attack. The human ships were so small compared to ours that it looked like adults fighting children. We expected them to run or hide behind their planets. Instead, they charged straight at our fleet with weapons firing. What happened next changed everything we thought we knew about warfare. The humans did not try to win in the normal way. They did not attempt to outrun us or find cover. Captain Morrison aimed his ship directly at our flagship and accelerated to ramming speed. His crew could have escaped in life pods, but they stayed with him. The Defiant struck our flagship, and both ships exploded in a ball of fire that lit up the system. In one moment, the humans lost their best ship, and we lost our command vessel along with Admiral Vornash and his entire staff. The battle had barely begun, and already nothing was going according to plan. The remaining human ships continued attacking with a fury we had never seen before. They fought like cornered animals, but with the intelligence of advanced beings. When their weapons failed, they used their ships as missiles. When their ships were destroyed, the survivors kept fighting with whatever they could find. That first battle lasted 18 hours, and when it ended, we had lost 60 ships to their 12. We claimed victory because we held the field, but it felt like defeat. The humans had shown us something that would haunt us for the rest of the war. They valued victory more than survival, and that made them the most dangerous enemy we had ever faced. Zekthara turned back to face the young recruit whose face had gone pale. Now you know, youngling, the humans are not weak because they fear death. They are terrifying because they fear failure more than death. Remember this when you face them, and maybe you will live to tell someone else. Vexini shifted on the metal bench as Commander Zekthara continued his story. The older warrior's eyes held a distant look as he remembered events that had changed the course of the war. Outside the medical bay, other soldiers moved through the corridors, but none approached the corner where the two aliens sat. After the disaster at their home system, the High Command was angry, Zekthara said. They blamed Admiral Vornash for being careless even though he was dead. The War Council said one battle meant nothing and that humans had just been lucky. They sent an even larger fleet to attack the human mining colonies near the star they called Proxima Centauri. I was promoted to company commander after my squad leader died in the first battle. My new unit was assigned to the assault force that would capture the mining station orbiting the red dwarf star. Intelligence said the station had minimal defenses and would fall quickly. The High Command wanted to take human prisoners to study their biology and learn why they fought so strangely. The second fleet was massive compared to the first one. 500 warships with full marine battalions and enough firepower to crack a planet. General Kethmore commanded from the new flagship, and he promised the High Command that this time there would be no surprises. The humans would surrender or die, and either outcome was acceptable. When we arrived at the Proxima system, the mining station was exactly where our scouts said it would be. The structure was old and patched with salvaged metal plates. It looked like something humans had built quickly without caring about appearance. Our sensors showed fewer than 2,000 humans aboard with only basic weapons. General Kethmore sent the surrender demand and waited for their response. The human commander was a woman named Kate Sullivan, who held the rank of lieutenant in their space navy. Her message was short and used words our translators had trouble with. She said the station would fight until hell froze over and invited us to try taking it. The general was insulted by her response and ordered an immediate assault. The plan was to disable their weapons with precision strikes and then board the station with overwhelming force. My company was part of the first wave that would secure the docking bays, while other units captured key areas. The attack began with our heaviest ships bombarding the station's weapon platforms. The human defenses were exactly as weak as intelligence had predicted. Their plasma cannons were destroyed within minutes, and their missile launchers ran out of ammunition quickly. The station seemed helpless as our boarding craft approached the docking ports, but the humans had prepared surprises that our intelligence missed. When the first wave of boarding craft entered the docking bay, the humans triggered explosive charges that had been hidden in the walls. The blasts destroyed half our assault shuttles and killed dozens of Marines before they could even deploy. Lieutenant Sullivan had used the time during our bombardment to prepare her defenses. The humans had turned every corridor into a kill zone. with improvised explosive devices and concealed firing positions. They used their knowledge of the station layout to move through maintenance shafts and service tunnels that our armor could not fit through. My company entered through Docking Bay 7 and immediately came under fire from positions we could not see. The humans used weapons that fired metal projectiles instead of energy beams. The primitive bullets could not penetrate our armor, but they made loud noises and bright flashes that confused our sensors. Worse than that, the humans seemed to appear and disappear like ghosts. The fighting moved deeper into the station as we tried to secure each section. The humans did not defend positions the way rational beings should. Instead of holding strong points, they would attack our flanks and then retreat before we could respond. They used the station's own systems against us by shutting off artificial gravity or filling sections with toxic gas. A human engineer named Pete Collins had rigged the station's power grid to overload on command. Every time we thought we had secured an area, he would trigger an explosion that would kill our soldiers and damage our equipment. The humans seemed to know exactly where we were at all times while we stumbled through corridors that all looked the same. The most disturbing thing was how the humans fought when they were cornered. When we finally trapped a group of them in the main reactor chamber, they did not surrender or try to negotiate. Instead, they began a countdown to overload the reactor core, which would destroy the entire station. Pete Collins stood at the control panel with his hand on the activation switch. Lieutenant Sullivan appeared on the communication system and told us we had 30 seconds to evacuate our forces, or everyone would die together. She said the humans would rather destroy themselves than become prisoners. General Kethmore thought she was bluffing because no rational species would commit suicide just to deny an enemy a victory. The countdown reached 0, and Pete Collins activated the overload sequence. The reactor core went critical, and the explosion tore the station apart from the inside. The blast destroyed the entire structure along with every human aboard and 3 companies of our best Marines. We lost 400 soldiers to capture empty wreckage. General Kethmore was furious because the humans had denied us the victory and prisoners we needed. But something worse happened in the aftermath of the battle. The story of what the humans had done spread through our fleet and then to other units throughout the hegemony military. Soldiers began to whisper about an enemy that would choose death over defeat. The High Command tried to control the information, but word traveled faster than their censorship. Soon, every warrior in the hegemony knew about the mining station and the humans who destroyed themselves rather than surrender. The story grew with each telling until humans seemed like mythical beings who could not be defeated by conventional means. Some of our soldiers began to fear facing humans in battle. They had seen what happened to 2 fleets that were supposed to win easy victories. The humans had shown they would use tactics that no sane species would consider. They turned their own deaths into weapons against us, and that was something our military doctrine had never prepared us to face. The War Council held emergency meetings to discuss new strategies for fighting humans. They brought in experts on alien, psychology, and warfare to explain human behavior. But none of them could answer the basic question that troubled every soldier. How do you defeat an enemy that considers dying for their cause to be a victory? Lieutenant Sullivan and her crew became famous among human forces as heroes who showed their people how to fight against impossible odds. Among our soldiers, they became something else entirely. They were proof that humans were not a normal species that could be conquered through superior firepower and tactics. That was when I began to understand what we were really fighting, Zekthara told the young recruit. We thought we were conquering primitives who would submit to our authority. Instead, we had declared war on a species that would burn down the galaxy before they would kneel to anyone. The medical bay grew quieter as the night shift began and fewer soldiers moved through the corridors. Commander Zekthara cleaned his weapon with slow, deliberate movements while he continued his story. Vexini noticed the commander's hands shook slightly when he handled certain parts of the gun, as if some memories were too painful to recall clearly. After the mining station disaster, the High Command decided to change tactics, Zekthara said. They realized that attacking human space installations was too costly, so they planned to invade human ground facilities instead. The target was their moon, which orbited their home planet and contained massive underground mining complexes. I was given command of a full battalion for the lunar assault. Our intelligence said the moon had weak gravity and thin atmosphere, which would give our powered armor advantages over human defenders. The underground tunnels were mapped by our spies and seemed perfect for our close combat specialists. The High Command expected an easy victory that would restore confidence in our military. The invasion fleet approached the human moon with overwhelming force. 200 assault ships carried 50,000 Marines to capture tunnels that held maybe 5,000 human miners and a few hundred security guards. The humans had no warships in orbit, and their ground defenses looked primitive compared to our heavy weapons. General Morketh commanded the operation from the flagship, while battalion commanders like me led the actual assault. The plan was simple and direct. We would land at multiple points and advance through the tunnel system until we controlled the entire underground complex. The humans would be trapped with nowhere to run. The first sign that something was wrong came when our landing craft touched down. The human defenders did not rush to meet us at the surface like normal military forces would do. Instead, they seemed to have abandoned the outer areas completely. Our sensors detected movement deep in the tunnels, but the surface installations were empty. My battalion entered the tunnel system through the main mining entrance, which our maps showed led to the central hub. The tunnels were wide enough for our armor and well lit by human electrical systems. Everything seemed normal as we advanced in standard formation with scouts ahead and heavy weapons covering our flanks. The attack came from directions we did not expect. The humans had modified the tunnel system by cutting new passages that did not appear on any of our maps. They could move through spaces too narrow for our armor and attack from above or below through hidden openings. Their leader was a former mining foreman named Carl Bradley, who knew every meter of the underground complex. Bradley had turned the entire tunnel system into a deadly maze, where our superior numbers meant nothing. The humans would strike at our forward elements and then disappear through passages we could not follow. They used improvised explosive devices hidden in the walls and ceiling to collapse tunnels behind us and trap our units in dead-end passages. Psychological warfare was worse than the physical attacks. The humans left recording devices playing in abandoned sections of the tunnels. Human voices would sing their war songs or tell stories of previous battles where they had defeated larger forces. The sounds echoed through the passages and seemed to come from everywhere at once. Some of our soldiers began to crack under the mental pressure. They would fire at shadows or claim they saw humans in areas our sensors showed were empty. The constant stress of not knowing when or where the next attack would come made even veteran warriors nervous and trigger-happy. We started taking casualties from friendly fire as much as enemy action. The humans used the tunnel environment in ways we never imagined possible. They would flood sections with toxic mining gases or shut off the air circulation to create dead zones. They rigged elevators to fail and sent loaded ore cars rolling down slopes to crush our formations. Every piece of mining equipment became a potential weapon in their hands. Carl Bradley seemed to be everywhere at once, directing the resistance. He would appear on our communication channels to taunt us or give false information about safe routes through the tunnels. Sometimes he would offer to let trapped units surrender if they laid down their weapons. When desperate soldiers tried to take his offer, they would find only empty tunnels and recorded laughter. The worst incident happened to Captain Vorth's company in the deep mining section. They had been cut off from the main force for 2 days and were running low on power for their armor systems. Bradley contacted them directly and said he would show them a way out if they followed his instructions. Exactly, Vorth was desperate to save his soldiers, so he agreed to Bradley's terms. The human guided them through a series of passages that seemed to lead toward the surface, but the route was actually a trap that led deeper into the mining complex, where the humans had prepared a special welcome for their visitors. The company walked into a chamber where the humans had rigged hundreds of explosive charges. When the last soldier entered the room, Bradley triggered the detonation from a safe distance. The blast brought down thousands of tons of rock and buried the entire company alive. Their distress signals could be heard for hours before the power finally failed. Word of the massacre spread through our remaining forces, and morale collapsed completely. Soldiers refused orders to advance into unmapped sections, and some units retreated to the surface without permission. The humans had broken our will to fight by showing that they could kill us whenever they chose. But the most frightening thing was what happened to the survivors who were trapped in collapsed tunnels. The humans could have left them to die, but instead they provided air and water to keep them alive. Carl Bradley would visit the trapped soldiers and talk to them about human history and culture while they waited for rescue. He told them stories about human miners who had worked in similar tunnels for generations. He explained how humans learned to survive in the most dangerous environments by depending on each other. The trapped soldiers began to understand that humans were not cruel by nature, but they would be absolutely ruthless when protecting their homes. When we finally evacuated the moon after 6 weeks of fighting, we left behind 3,000 casualties and gained nothing. The humans had turned their own workplace into a fortress that we could not conquer, despite having overwhelming advantages in numbers and equipment. Carl Bradley and his miners had taught our military a lesson about the power of knowing your ground. The High Command tried to claim the operation was a success because we had damaged human mining operations, but every soldier who fought in those tunnels knew the truth. We had been defeated by miners and construction workers using improvised weapons and determination. The humans had shown they could win on their own territory, even when badly outnumbered. That was when I realized we were not fighting a conventional war, Zekthara told the recruit. We were fighting a species that could turn any environment into a weapon, and any civilian into a soldier. The humans did not need military training to be dangerous because their entire culture was built around surviving impossible situations. Commander Zekthara paused in his story to check the time display on the medical bay wall. The night cycle was deep, and most of the ship's crew was asleep, but he knew the young recruit needed to hear everything before his first mission to human space. The memories of what came next still made the veteran warrior's carapace itch with phantom pain. The siege of New Geneva was supposed to be our great victory, Zekthara continued. The High Command had learned from previous failures and planned a campaign that would finally show human weakness. They chose a human colony world that was isolated from their main supply routes and had limited defensive capabilities. New Geneva was a farming world with about 2 million human settlers who grew food crops for export to other human colonies. The planet had only one major city and a small military garrison that could not possibly resist a full-scale invasion. The High Command saw it as the perfect target to demonstrate hegemony power without risking another disaster. General Kethura commanded the invasion force with strict orders to capture the planet intact. The humans would be allowed to surrender, and those who cooperated would be treated well. The plan was to use New Geneva as an example to other human worlds of what happened when they accepted hegemony rule peacefully. My regiment was part of the ground forces that landed outside the capital city after our fleet destroyed the orbital defenses. The human military commander was Colonel Helen Wright, who had served in previous wars against other species. Intelligence reports said she was competent, but not exceptional, and would likely surrender when faced with impossible odds. The siege began according to plan, with our forces surrounding the city and cutting off all supply routes. We controlled the spaceport and all major roads leading to other settlements. Our fleet maintained a blockade that prevented any ships from reaching the planet. The humans were completely isolated with no hope of rescue or resupply. Colonel Wright refused our surrender demands and told her people to prepare for a long siege. The humans began rationing food and ammunition while our forces tightened the circle around their positions. Our sensors showed their supply levels dropping steadily, and the High Command calculated they would surrender within 1 month. But the humans had hidden resources that our intelligence missed. They had prepared underground storage facilities and secret supply caches throughout the city. More importantly, they had something that no military analyst could quantify in their calculations. They had hope that somehow help would come even when it seemed impossible. 3 weeks into the siege, our intercepted communications showed the humans were reaching critical shortages. Their food supplies were almost gone, and ammunition for their weapons was running low. Medical supplies were exhausted, and wounded civilians were dying from treatable injuries. The situation looked hopeless from any rational perspective. That was when we detected a single human transport ship approaching the planet at high speed. The vessel was identified as the Liberty Bell, commanded by Captain Ryan Murphy, who had somehow broken through our blockade without being detected until the last moment. Our fleet moved to intercept him, but he was already too close to the planet to stop. The Liberty Bell was an old cargo hauler that looked like it had been patched together from spare parts. Our warships opened fire as soon as it came into range, but Murphy kept his ship on course toward the besieged city. The transport was hit multiple times and began venting atmosphere, but still continued its approach. I watched from the ground as the human ship fell through the atmosphere like a burning meteor. Pieces of hull plating and debris scattered behind it as it lost structural integrity. Our anti-aircraft weapons hit it again and again, but somehow the main section held together long enough to reach the city limits. The Liberty Bell crashed in the central plaza of New Geneva with an impact that shook buildings for kilometers around. The wreckage caught fire immediately, and black smoke rose into the sky. Our commanders assumed everyone aboard was dead and that the desperate rescue attempt had failed completely. But then something happened that changed the entire nature of the siege. The twisted remains of the cargo ship began to open, and figures emerged from the smoke and flames. These were not supplies or medical aid as we had expected. Instead, Colonel Wright and her volunteers had brought something far more valuable. Captain Murphy had carried a full company of elite human soldiers who had volunteered for what everyone knew was a suicide mission. These were veterans from previous campaigns who had fought the hegemony on other worlds. They brought fresh weapons and ammunition, but more importantly, they brought proof that the outside world had not forgotten New Geneva. The psychological impact on both sides was immediate and dramatic. The human defenders who had been losing hope suddenly found new strength to continue fighting. They cheered and sang their war songs, while the rescue force took positions alongside the local militia. The entire atmosphere in the city changed from despair to determination. Our soldiers were shaken by what they had witnessed. A single human had flown through our entire fleet and delivered reinforcements to a doomed city. The rescue should have been impossible, but Ryan Murphy had done it anyway. Even though he died in the crash, his mission was a complete success. The new troops were led by Major Kevin Brooks, who had fought hegemony forces on 6 different worlds. His soldiers were equipped with advanced weapons and had extensive experience in urban warfare. More importantly, they brought new tactics that our forces had not encountered before. Brooks immediately began organizing counterattacks that caught our siege forces off guard. Instead of defending fixed positions, the humans started raiding our supply lines and communication posts. They used the sewage system and utility tunnels to move unseen through areas we thought we controlled. The siege that should have ended in human surrender became a brutal grinding campaign that lasted for months. Every attempt to storm the city was met with fierce resistance from defenders who seemed to grow stronger instead of weaker. The humans had turned desperation into a weapon against us. Our casualties mounted steadily while human morale remained high. They celebrated small victories and mourned their dead with ceremonies that inspired the living to fight harder. The story of Ryan Murphy's sacrifice was told and retold until every human in the city knew his name and what he had died to accomplish. General Keth Ura finally ordered a full assault to end the siege quickly before it became an even greater embarrassment. But the attack failed when human defenders triggered explosive charges that brought down entire city blocks on our advancing forces. The humans were willing to destroy their own homes to stop us. The High Command eventually decided that New Geneva was not worth the cost and ordered a withdrawal. We had lost thousands of soldiers trying to capture one city that should have fallen easily. The humans had proven again that they would fight impossible odds and somehow find ways to win. As our forces retreated, the humans did not pursue or try to inflict more casualties. Instead, they began the work of rebuilding their city and caring for their wounded. They treated our prisoners well and even provided medical aid to injured hegemony soldiers who had been left behind. That was when I understood the true nature of human warfare, Zekathara told the recruit. They do not fight because they enjoy violence or conquest. They fight because they believe their cause is worth any sacrifice, and that belief makes them invincible. The ship's artificial gravity hummed quietly as Commander Zekathara reached the most difficult part of his story. His scarred hands trembled slightly as he set down his weapon and looked directly at the young recruit. What happened at Europa Station was the moment when everything changed and the war took a turn that no one in the Hegemony High Command had thought possible. The High Command was desperate after years of costly failures against human forces, Zekathara said. Every battle had taught them that humans could not be defeated through conventional warfare. The decision was made to deploy the World Breaker, our most terrible weapon that could crack planets in half and reduce entire star systems to rubble. I was promoted to brigade commander by then because so many senior officers had been killed or driven mad by fighting humans. My forces were assigned to guard the World Breaker platform while it charged its main weapon to destroy the human home world. The plan was to end the war with one decisive strike that would break human resistance forever. The World Breaker was a massive space station that took 50 years to build and contained technology from our most advanced research facilities. When fully charged, it could generate enough energy to shatter a planet's core and turn solid matter into cosmic dust. No species had ever survived having their home world destroyed by such a weapon. Admiral Steve Parker commanded the remaining human fleet that tried to stop us from reaching Earth. His ships were outnumbered 10-1 and faced weapons they had no hope of matching. Logic said he should retreat and try to evacuate as many humans as possible before their world was destroyed. Instead, he chose to attack. The human fleet came at us in a formation that made no tactical sense. Instead of concentrating their firepower on single targets, they spread out to attack the World Breaker platform from multiple directions. Our defensive systems easily destroyed most of their ships, but a few managed to break through our lines. What happened next still haunts my dreams and changed how I think about warfare forever. The surviving human ships did not try to destroy the World Breaker platform because they knew their weapons were not powerful enough. Instead, they tried to capture it, and that seemed completely insane to every Hegemony Commander Marine Colonel. Nancy Adams led the boarding parties that somehow fought their way onto the platform despite our heavy defenses. Her soldiers were vastly outnumbered by our garrison troops, but they had advantages we did not understand. They knew exactly where to strike to disable key systems and seemed to have detailed knowledge of our technology. The battle inside the platform was unlike anything I had experienced in decades of military service. The humans fought with a combination of desperation and precision that our soldiers could not match. They used our own weapons against us and turned captured equipment into improvised explosives that devastated our defensive positions. Colonel Adams had studied hegemony military doctrine and technology for years before the assault. She knew our weaknesses and blind spots better than most of our own commanders. Her troops moved through the platform like they had trained there for months, even though they had never seen the interior before. The most shocking moment came when the humans reached the main control center and began operating the World Breaker systems. These were weapons that had taken our best scientists decades to develop and required years of training to use safely. The humans learned to control them in a matter of hours. Captain Larry Stone was a human engineer who had somehow deciphered our control interfaces and figured out how to redirect the weapon's targeting systems. Within 6 hours of capturing the platform, he had the World Breaker aimed at our home worlds instead of Earth. The humans now controlled enough firepower to end our entire civilization, But what they did next surprised everyone on both sides of the conflict. Instead of destroying our worlds in revenge, the humans used precise strikes to disable military installations while broadcasting surrender terms. They demonstrated that they could end the war immediately, but chose to offer mercy instead. The surrender message was delivered by Admiral Parker himself from the bridge of the captured Worldbreaker platform. He spoke directly to the Hegemony High Command and offered terms that seemed too generous to believe. The humans wanted an end to hostilities and genuine peace between our species. The High Command tried to reject the surrender terms and ordered our remaining fleets to retake the platform. But word of what had happened spread through our military, faster than official communications. Soldiers who had fought humans for years understood what the offer meant, and many units refused to continue fighting. I was ordered to lead an assault on the platform to recapture it from the humans. But when I looked at my soldiers, I saw fear and exhaustion in their eyes. They had watched friends die in pointless battles against an enemy that seemed impossible to defeat. The idea of attacking humans who now controlled a planet-killing weapon was more than they could accept. The mutiny began in my own brigade when junior officers refused to board the assault ships. Within hours, the rebellion had spread to other units throughout the fleet. Soldiers who had fought bravely for years suddenly decided they would rather face court-martial than continue a war that could not be won. General Canthera tried to restore order by threatening to execute mutinous officers, but his own staff turned against him. The realization that humans could destroy our worlds at any moment had broken the will of our military leadership. Fear of the Worldbreaker was less important than fear of what humans might do if pushed too far. The final surrender came when our Supreme Commander contacted Admiral Parker directly and accepted the human terms without conditions. The war that was supposed to last 2 rotations had gone on for 6 years and ended with our most powerful weapon in enemy hands. We had lost everything while trying to conquer a species we never understood. What followed was even more confusing than the surrender itself. The humans immediately began sharing their technology and resources with us. They provided medical aid to our wounded soldiers and helped repair ships that had been damaged in battle. Captain Larry Stone worked with our engineers to improve our own weapons and defenses. Colonel Adams organized joint training exercises where human and hegemony forces learned to work together. She treated former enemies with respect and patience while teaching them new tactics and strategies. The humans seemed genuinely interested in cooperation rather than domination. The most disturbing thing was how easily the humans adapted to using our advanced technology. Within months, they had improved on designs that our scientists had worked on for decades. They found ways to make our weapons more efficient and our ships faster. It was as if they had been holding back their true capabilities throughout the entire war. Admiral Parker explained to our leaders that humanity had fought defensively because they hoped for peaceful contact with other species. They had developed their military technology in secret while publicly appearing weak and primitive. The war could have ended much sooner if humans had revealed their true strength from the beginning. I understood why every battle against humans had been so difficult, Zekthara told the recruit. We were not fighting primitives who got lucky. We were fighting a species that had deliberately appeared weaker than they really were. They had been testing us to see if we could be reasoned with, and we had failed that test completely. The medical bay had grown completely quiet, except for the soft hum of life support systems. Commander Zekthara looked at the young recruit who sat in stunned silence, trying to process everything he had heard. The veteran warrior knew this final part of the story would be the hardest for Vexini to understand, because it challenged everything the hegemony had taught about human nature. The peace negotiations were led by a human diplomat named Chris Thompson, who had studied our culture for years before the war began, Zekthara said. He spoke our language perfectly and understood our social customs better than most of our own officials. Thompson had been preparing for this moment since first contact, and his patience showed in every detail. Thompson's terms seemed impossible at first because they went far beyond a simple ceasefire. He wanted complete integration between human and hegemony societies with shared technology and open borders. The idea of cooperating with a species we had tried to exterminate seemed like madness to our negotiators. But Thompson explained that humans had learned something important about the galaxy during their war with us. They realized that every species would eventually face threats that could not be handled alone. The choice was cooperation or eventual extinction for everyone, including humans themselves. The High Command was suspicious of human motives because generous peace terms usually meant the victor was planning something worse. Our analysts tried to find hidden clauses or secret conditions that would give humans advantages over us. Instead, they found offers of genuine partnership that seemed too good to be true. Chris Thompson brought human scientists and engineers to work with our research teams on projects that would benefit both species. The humans shared medical technology that could extend hegemony lifespans by decades. They offered manufacturing techniques that would make our ships faster and our weapons more efficient. Engineer Amy Foster became famous throughout hegemony space for her work on fusion reactor designs that could power entire worlds. She trained our technicians personally and refused payment for sharing knowledge that was worth billions of credits. Foster said human advancement meant nothing if other species were left behind. The most shocking discovery came when human researchers helped us solve problems that had puzzled hegemony scientists for generations. They found cures for diseases that had killed millions of our people and developed new materials that revolutionized our construction industry. The humans had capabilities we never suspected during the war. Thompson explained that humanity had been watching the hegemony for decades before we made contact. They knew about our expansion into other species' territories and our practice of enslaving conquered populations. The humans had been preparing for war since their first spy ships detected our fleet movements. Human intelligence services had infiltrated hegemony space, using disguised ships and artificial agents that looked like members of other species. They had stolen our military plans and studied our tactics while we believed they were primitive and isolated. The war had been decided before the first shot was fired. The realization that humans had known about us all along changed how our people thought about the conflict. We had not lost because of bad luck or poor planning. We had been outmaneuvered by a species that understood us better than we understood ourselves. The humans had fought defensively because they were giving us chances to prove we could be trusted. Admiral Parker visited hegemony worlds to speak with former soldiers about their experiences during the war. He listened to stories about battles and casualties without showing anger or demanding retribution. Parker said humans did not fight for revenge, but to protect innocent lives from aggressive species. The veterans who met Parker came away changed by the experience. They realized that humans had shown restraint during the war and could have inflicted much greater casualties if they had chosen to do so. Every human victory had been measured to cause minimum loss of life while achieving strategic objectives. Colonel Wright established training centers where former enemies learned to work together on peacekeeping missions. Hegemony soldiers who had fought against her at New Geneva now served under her command in joint operations. She treated them as equals and trusted them with important responsibilities. The psychological adjustment was difficult for many hegemony citizens who had spent years believing humans were dangerous primitives. Learning that we had been completely wrong about their capabilities and intentions forced our society to question other assumptions about the galaxy and our place in it. Some hegemony officials tried to restart hostilities by claiming the peace treaty was signed under duress. But these efforts failed when our own military leaders refused to support renewed warfare. The soldiers who had fought humans knew the truth about their capabilities and would not be part of another doomed campaign. Human technology began appearing throughout hegemony space as trade agreements replaced military occupation. Our worlds became more prosperous and peaceful than they had been in centuries. The improvements in living standards made it impossible for war advocates to gain popular support. Thompson organized cultural exchange programs that allowed young people from both species to study on each other's worlds. These students returned home with new perspectives and friendships that made future conflicts less likely. The next generation would grow up seeing cooperation as natural rather than strange. The strangest part of the piece was how quickly humans forgave what we had done to them. They helped rebuild worlds we had damaged during the war and provided aid to hegemony refugees who had lost their homes. Human medical teams worked alongside our doctors to treat civilians who had been injured during fighting. Amy Foster's research teams included scientists from dozens of species, including many who had been enslaved by the hegemony before the war. She said diversity of thought was essential for solving complex problems, and that isolation led to stagnation. The humans had learned this lesson long before they met us. Years passed, and the partnership between humans and the hegemony grew stronger despite predictions that it would fail. Trade flourished, and joint research projects produced innovations that neither species could have achieved alone. The galaxy became more peaceful as other civilizations followed our example. Now I serve on mixed crews where humans and hegemony, soldiers work side by side, Zekathara told the recruit. The humans I once feared as enemies have become trusted friends who share their knowledge freely. They ask nothing in return except that we help others as they helped us. The greatest lesson I learned from fighting humans is that strength comes in many forms, the commander continued. Physical power and advanced weapons mean nothing without wisdom and restraint. The humans defeated us not because they were better killers, but because they were better at everything else. Thompson once told me that humanity's greatest fear was not conquest by hostile aliens, but isolation in an empty galaxy. They fought us so fiercely because they wanted to prove that cooperation between species was possible. Every battle was a test to see if we could learn to be better than our history suggested. Remember this when you meet humans in your service, youngling. They are not the monsters our propaganda described or the weaklings our intelligence reports claimed. They are something far more dangerous and wonderful. They are a species that chooses hope over fear and builds bridges instead of walls. The humans taught us that the most terrifying enemy is one who defeats you and then helps you become better than you were before. They won our war, not when they captured the world breaker, but when they chose to use that victory to create peace instead of demanding revenge. That is why they will always be the most dangerous species in the galaxy.